If you've never stood watch on a container ship at night, let this settle in your bones. The ocean doesn't look like water out there. It looks like a surface, a lid, something pretending to be flat. Caleb Sutter learned that on the MV Kestrel Crown, 3 days into a crossing that had been almost insultingly calm. No drama, no busted winches, no galley wars, just the steady thrum of a ship the size of a city block doing what ships do, cutting a black road through blacker things. Caleb was an able seaman, which meant his job was a stew of everything. Lash, check, clean, fix, stand watch, repeat. He'd been at sea long enough to respect the boring days. Boring days meant you lived long enough to complain about them. That night, he had the midnight to 4. The deck was a canyon of stacked steel containers, tier after tier like a city built by cranes and regret. Floodlights threw hard shadows, lashings saying thin metallic notes in the wind. Caleb walked his route with a flashlight clipped to his vest. And then the ship shuddered. Not a wave slap, not a roll, not the familiar groan of flexing steel. This was a hit. A deep, blunt impact that traveled through the deck plates and up Caleb's legs into his teeth. Containers clacked in sympathetic chatter, twist locks answering like nervous bones. Caleb stopped dead. He waited for the follow-up, scraping, grinding, anything that meant collision. But nothing. Just the ocean. Just the wind. Engines humming like they hadn't noticed somebody punched their home. He keyed his radio. "Bridge, this is deck watch. Heavy impact felt midships. You catch that?" The reply came after a breath too long. "Deck, this is Bridge. We felt it. No alarms. No speed change. Continue watch. Report anything unusual." Caleb told himself it was a rogue swell, a bad angle, a freak slap. He took 3 steps. The second hit came in the same place, same depth, same blunt certainty. Not chaotic, not random, like someone knocking with the flat of a hand. Caleb keyed again. "Bridge, second impact, same spot." "Copy," the bridge said. "Stand by." The third impact came after a pause, as if whatever was out there was waiting to see if the ship would answer. And then the ship made a sound Caleb had never heard. A long, low boom that wasn't machinery, wasn't pipework, wasn't any alarm. It was the sound of steel resonating wrong, like a bell struck with a fist. Caleb moved to the rail. The sea was black glass, the wake a pale seam. But beside the ship under the surface he saw a broad smear of lighter darkness moving with them. Not foam, too smooth. A shape displacing water close enough to be felt, far enough to be denied. His radio crackled. "Deck, this is Bridge. Chief mate wants you on the bridge, now." On the bridge, the mood was all clipped voices and tight shoulders. Captain Ibarra stood behind the consoles, staring at the screens like they'd personally betrayed him. Chief Mate Rojas hovered over the navigation display and depth returns. The third officer sat rigid at comms. Caleb stepped in and instantly felt like the only man who hadn't been invited to a funeral. "Tell me what you felt," Rojas said. Caleb described the hits, the resonance, the way the container stacks answered like teeth chattering. Captain Ibarra didn't look away from the instruments. Radar clean, no service contacts, no AIS targets nearby. Rojas tapped the depth return history. Echo sounder is throwing intermittent junk under the keel. It isn't reading like seabed or normal scatter. Rojas hesitated. Either it's fake returns or something down there is so large we're only catching pieces of it. The bridge went quiet. Nobody could find the joke. Captain Ibarra finally looked at Caleb. His eyes were tired and sharp at the same time. "Caleb, back on deck. 2 hands with you. Check lashings, check damage, report immediately. As he turned to go, he heard the 3rd officer whisper something like a prayer into the glow of his screens. They found no cracked welds, no snapped bars, no bent rails. But Caleb noticed something that made his skin itch. A container in the impact zone looked wrong. Not shifted, not crooked. Wrong the way a smile looks wrong when it arrives too early. It was a 40-foot box painted a dull ocean gray. No company logo, no more markings. Just stenciled warnings. Restricted, do not open at sea, authorized personnel only. Caleb's flashlight swept it, and the beam caught details he hadn't seen before. Extra vents along the side, heavy-duty seals, and a power connection like a reefer container, but not quite. And the metal looked wet, not rain wet. The sky was clear. No spray reached that far inboard. This was condensation, a cold sheen that made the steel shine like skin. A thin trail ran down from the door seam, a drip. Caleb touched it with a gloved finger and brought it to his nose. Salt, fresh brine. Jensen, one of the deckhands, came up beside him. "We're not taking spray here." Caleb didn't answer because the ship took another hit directly under their feet. But Caleb just stared at the restricted container. From inside it, faint as a thought, came a low, steady hum. Not a bang, not scratching. A continuous tone like pumps running or something trying to sing through steel. Caleb keyed the radio. "Bridge, this is deck watch. Impacts continue. Restricted container midship appears to be leaking brine. Possible compromise. Request instructions." The reply came too fast, as if they'd been waiting for him to say it. "Deck, this is Bridge. Do not approach that container. Repeat, do not approach. Return to bridge immediately." Caleb backed away, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Captain Ibarra had the manifest on screen when Caleb returned. His jaw was set in a way that said the universe had offered him 2 bad doors, and he'd probably already grabbed both handles. "That container was added under private contract in Long Beach," he said. "Paperwork is thin." Rojas said quietly, "Thin like someone didn't want it seen." Captain Ibarra looked at Caleb. "We are not opening it. We are not tampering with it. We are not dying for curiosity." Another impact shook the bridge windows, followed by a suction-like sound, as if something huge pressed to the hull and released. Rojas stared at the depth returns. "Contact is moving with us perfectly." Captain Ibarra snapped. "Alter course 5 degrees starboard. Let's see if it follows." The helmsman turned the wheel. The rudder answered. The ship began to change heading. For a moment, hope flickered. Then the ship's track over ground corrected back, slow and undeniable, as if the ocean itself nudged the bow into line. The helmsman swallowed. "Rudder's responding, Captain, but our course over ground is snapping back." Rojas' hands trembled. "It isn't following, it's guiding." Captain Ibarra's face went hard. Engines, full ahead, increased speed. Engine vibration deepened. For 30 seconds it felt like victory. Then 2 impacts struck under the restricted container, rapid and precise. The ship rang like a struck bell. The hum from the container rose a fraction, as if answering. Rojas whispered, "It's responding to it." Captain Ibarra didn't whisper. "No, it's testing us." They tried everything that made sense. Course changes, the ocean corrected them back. Speed changes, the contact matched instantly. SATCOM calls that failed mid-sentence. A distress ping that sent clean and bright, and came back with nothing but silence. By dawn, the crew moved like men in a bad dream. Quiet, quick, eyes sliding to the sea and away again. Caleb was ordered below with the bosun and 2 hands to inspect the interior near the impact zone. Down in the ship's belly, the air smelled of oil and metal and stale heat. The corridor near the ballast spaces felt pressurized, like the ship was holding its breath. The bosun, Malik, crouched at a section of hull plating and ran his fingers over the paint. He frowned. That ain't right. Caleb leaned in. The paint was scuffed in arcs, smooth, polished rings that repeated. Jensen's voice turned small. Like suction marks? Malik snapped a look at him, but didn't deny it. A tremor ran through the corridor, not a hit, a presence. The steel wall flexed inward by a hair, and through the metal came a low, vibrating moan, so deep it was more sensation than sound. Malik thumbed his radio. "Bridge, we got pressure contact on the hull. Repeating ring marks. Whatever it is, it's attached." "Copy," the bridge said. "Return immediately." Caleb turned to go and froze. From above, through the deck plates and steel, came the container's hum. And from outside the hull, the deep moan answered in the same rhythm. Call. Response. Something out there wasn't attacking. It was communicating with something they were carrying. That night, Caleb drew the short straw. A lashing check near the restricted stack. The stars were sharp. The sea was calm. Calm enough to make the black water look like it could open. The restricted container was colder now, brine streaming down its doors like sweat. Caleb shone his light on the lock. The steel around it was bowed outward, dented from the inside. Jensen's breath came out thin. "You seeing that?" Caleb nodded. The hum rose, and for the first time, he could swear it had structure, like a voice trying to form a word. The ocean answered. A massive pressure pressed against the hull, steady, controlled, and the deck tilted a fraction as if the ship leaned into someone's hand. Caleb gripped a lashing bar. Jensen stumbled, caught himself, and stared over the rail. Caleb followed his gaze. Beside the ship, the water blanched pale as something enormous rose just beneath the surface, not breaking through, not surfacing, just approaching. A smooth arc the size of a submarine's back. Then another. And then, in the ship's light, an eye-like shape the size of a hatch cover reflected back at them, cold and wet and watching. It didn't blink. It waited. Caleb tried to move and realized the ship felt pinned, like forward motion had thickened in syrup. Then the tapping started. 3 taps on the hull, and then a pause, and then 2, and then a pause, and then 1. In that same rhythm, the dented lock on the container thudded from inside. Jensen backed away, shaking his head. Caleb couldn't stop staring at the container. Whatever was inside wasn't just cargo. It was answering. At 2:40 a.m., the captain ordered a turn. At 2:41 a.m., the ship's heading changed, and the track over ground corrected back. At 2:42 a.m., the impacts moved higher, pressing up the ship's side directly below the restricted container. Not ramming, searching for something. Twist locks squealed, lashings rang. A top box shifted an inch and settled with a sound that made Caleb's stomach drop. Rojas came over the speakers. "All hands abandon deck, secure inside." Then the sound from inside the restricted container changed. Not a hum, a muffled cry. Wrong, deep, and heartbreakingly alive, like something built for water trying to speak through steel. Caleb froze so hard it felt like drowning on land. Jensen's voice cracked. "What the hell is in there?" The pressure on the hull increased, focused in a vertical line from waterline to container stack, as if something below was carefully trying to open a path. Not to sink the ship, to reach that box. Below deck, the captain's voice came through the intercom, clipped and furious. This is Captain Ibarra. Emergency protocol. The restricted container will be addressed. Caleb's eyes widened at the sound that followed. The Kestrel Crown was a geared ship, one of the few with its own deck cranes for ports without shore gear. He'd never been more terrified to hear them. "They're moving it," he whispered. Jensen laughed once, sharp and broken. "At sea? That's suicide." But the ship wasn't rolling much. It was being held, cradled, pinned by something large enough to make the ocean feel like hands. A new sound joined the chaos above, steel screaming. Up top, the crane arm swung toward the restricted container. Deck crew shouted and cleared zones. The air felt colder near the box, and brine streamed down its doors in steady lines. Captain Ibarra was on deck too, face carved from stubbornness and fear. "Captain," Caleb shouted. Ibarra's eyes flashed. "You were ordered inside." Caleb pointed at the box. "Something's alive in there." Rojas stared over the rail. "Captain, look." The sea beside the ship bulged upward like a hill forming under a black cloth. In the ship's glow, pale circular patterns appeared just under the surface. Suction cups, huge. The forward motion of the ship slowed until it felt like someone set it down gently in place. The crane operator yelled, "Spreader locked, we've got it." The spreader took weight. The moment the container lifted, the ocean answered with pressure. Not a strike, but a firm correction. The crane arm bucked like it had been shoved. Men shouted and scrambled back. Inside the container, the cry came again, sharper now. Another pressure wave rolled up the hull. Bulkhead alarms began to wail. Ibarra's certainty cracked. He looked at Caleb. "Can you release the twist locks manually if the crane needs the box free?" Caleb swallowed. "Aye, Captain." "Then do it," Ibarra said. "We're not losing the ship for a box." Caleb moved fast, hands shaking, releasing lashings first, clearing bars, working the mechanisms the way he'd done 1,000 times when it was normal. The restricted container vibrated under his hands. The instant a lock popped free, the pressure on the hull eased slightly. Caleb froze. It was waiting for compliance. He released the next. Again, the pressure eased. It wasn't attacking, it was negotiating. Caleb finished the last lock and backed away. Rojas shouted, "Lower it!" The crane operator hesitated. "Lower it where?" Captain Ibarra's voice went flat. "Over the side, now." The container swung over the black water. The sea beneath it lightened, as if something massive rose to meet it. Then a limb broke the surface just enough to be seen. Not thrashing, not violent. Thick and deliberate, lined with pale suction marks that glowed faintly like moonlit scars. It reached up and touched the container like touching something precious. The ship shuddered, not in pain but in relief. The limb curled gently. The container slipped into the sea with a splash that felt too small for what it meant. For a moment, the world held still. Then the pressure on the hull eased completely. The ship began to move forward again, free. Caleb wanted to believe it. He wanted the story to end. But the ocean doesn't do neat endings. Because the muffled cry didn't fade away. It moved, under the ship, then alongside, keeping pace. Rojas' voice trembled over comms. "Captain, contact's still with us." Ibarra's face hardened, but now it was dread, not stubbornness. "It took the container, why is it still here?" Caleb stared into the black and saw, behind the stern, a pale shape rise for half a second above the surface like a fin made of smooth flesh. And in the curve of it clung something smaller, a juvenile, a second presence. Caleb's stomach dropped. The container hadn't been holding cargo, it had been holding a baby. And the mother wasn't attacking. She was escorting and making sure the thieves didn't follow, didn't interfere, didn't live long enough to do it again. A final pressure pressed against the hull, steady as a hand on a shoulder. Not violence, a message. Go, and the ship went. When they reached port, officials boarded too fast, too clean, too eager to make the mess disappear. Caleb tried to tell them about the cry, the suction marks, the way the pressure eased when they complied. They didn't write that part down. And the strangest thing? The manifest didn't show the restricted container at all. Gone like it had never existed. But weeks later, on a calm night watch, Caleb found something wedged under a deck plate near midships. A pale, rubbery disc the size of his palm. A suction cup. Not ripped off. Left behind, like a fingerprint. Like proof. Or like a promise. Caleb stared at it until cold crawled up his spine. Because it meant something huge had been close enough to touch their steel city gently. Smart enough to negotiate, and smart enough to remember. And somewhere beyond charts and shipping lanes, something in the deep had learned a lesson. Steel cities float, and sometimes they carry things that don't belong above the surface. If you want more nightmares delivered fresh, hit like and subscribe. And if you ever find yourself far from shore, don't assume you're alone just because the water looks calm. Good night.